In a previous video from a few months ago, I talked about budgeting, and at the time I was trying to talk about some budgeting basics. And something I wanted to talk about with budgeting, or something that comes up a lot with budgeting, is the concept of benchmarks. Now, when I say benchmarks, it's not. It's almost never that I'm sitting with a client and the client brings up benchmarks, or they say, "Hey, I want to do some benchmarking and stuff." Most people don't even know what it is. And if you're wondering what benchmarking is, I'll get there in a second. But inevitably, the conversation does at some point revolve around benchmarking, just because benchmarks are really just standards or generally accepted percentages, or what the gurus or people out there who claim to know what they're talking about will say, well, this is what your budget should conform to. And so an example of a budget would be something like your rent. And for that matter, depending on who you talk to, they'll say your rent and your hydro, your household expenses, the expenses you incur in order to keep your household functioning, like rent, insurance, hydro, stuff like that, should never be more than 35% of your income. So that's a benchmark. Okay, groceries should be X. You shouldn't spend more than Y on food, or on car and stuff like that. Now, the good thing about benchmarks is like any kind of standard or any guideline, it can be useful. Like, it can be used to match your situation up against that. At the same time, I do tell people that it's very important to take these with a grain of salt, not just because no number is perfect, but you may have heard someone say before, a wise man once said, I think it was Thomas Sowell actually, there are no solutions, there's only trade-offs. And that's true with a budget. Situations change. Your lifestyle or the way you live is different from your neighbors. Case in point, let's just start off with rent. Okay, so people will say, well, your rent should be X of your income. Okay, that's fine. Obviously, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And obviously, the higher your rent, the less money left over for everything else. The less money you have for groceries, for car, for entertainment, for vacations, for investment, for all kinds of things. So obviously, if your rent in this, or even your mortgage, but let's stick with rent for now. Most clients are renters. Obviously, if you can rent a place for less money, that's advantageous to you. Now, the reason I say the benchmark is just a guideline, but not the word of God, is I'll tell people, I'll say, well, here's the generally accepted amount, and they'll go, okay, and I'll say, well, this kind of goes out the window when you're dealing with the elderly. They'll look at me kind of funny. What are you talking about? And I'll say, well, the elderly tend to have a very high ratio. Their rent tends to consume decent amount of their income. And they'll say, well, why is that? And I'll say, well, it's pretty simple. Old folks don't want to live in a shit box. That's pretty much the easy answer. That's not the eloquent answer, but it's the true answer. If you're 60, 70, 80 years old and you can afford to live in a nicer place, you probably want to live in a nicer place because you're spending a lot of time there. Now, you may say, well, that seems odd. I mean, aren't they on fixed income? Shouldn't they be more careful? Well, here's the thing. Again, consider lifestyle. If you're retired, if you're elderly, there's a good chance you're retired, which means you're not commuting to work every day, which means your car insurance is probably lower, which means your gasoline bill is probably lower, which also means you're less likely to be on the run, you're less likely to, be having your snacky snacks and, grabbing Tim Hortons along the way. There's all these other costs that all of a sudden you're less likely or to incur, not incurring at all. You flip that around, though. Take a 25-year-old who's out on his own for the first time. Not only will he live in a not so nice place, possibly, but he might even be willing to have a roommate. Why? Well, this guy has a social life. He wants to be able to go out, meet people. He's commuting to work, whether it's by car or by TTC. He's probably grabbing a Starbucks along the way. He has a lot of social expenses. It's a trade-off. And here's the thing. That's fine. Okay, that's fine as long as you can afford your life, and at the end of the day, you can live below, not at, below your means, and put some money away. If you want to spend, I've told people, look, if you want to spend $500 a month on comics, and you can still save money at the end of the day, and you're comfortable with that amount, and you're not getting into trouble, and your bank account is growing, and your investments are growing, who am I to tell you you're wrong? It's your life. Same thing goes for restaurants. I often tell people there's several reasons to have a budget. One of them is you're allowed to actually enjoy yourself. And people will say, well, I was told I should stop eating out. And sure enough, any guru, anyone online, anyone who tells you what to do with your money and insists they know better than you, will tell you, cut out those restaurants. Okay, yeah, look, it's cheaper to not go to restaurants. At the same time, for a lot of people, restaurants are their entertainment. It's kind of a 2-in-1. They don't go to the movies, they go to restaurants. And, if you want to spend X on restaurants, and again, you can afford it, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. We may argue about, how much is left over. Could you do better? Are there opportunities? Maybe don't cut out restaurants completely, but hey, you're spending $300 a month. What if you spent $200? You can still have fun. You're still going to restaurants, you're just going less. And again, if you want an example of trade-offs, I'll give you myself, okay? I, not as much as I used to, but I still grab a lot of takeout, more than the average person, okay? I've gotten better at bringing my lunch to work just because I like my food more than a lot of the fast food around me, though I'm surrounded by some good stuff. But also, it's easier. I don't always have time to run out during the day and get takeout. Grab a pizza slice or something. So it's just easier to bring my own food. But if I do takeout, it's usually at night. And anyone looking at my budget and not knowing anything about my life would look and say, "Boy, you spend a lot on pizza slices, or grabbing something at going to the supermarket and grabbing a prepared dish or whatever it is, and you should really cut that out. That's too much. After all, Zach, don't you like to cook?" I do like to cook. I would like nothing more than to leave the office every single day at 5 p.m., go home and cook for my wife and son. It's one of my favorite things, and I find it's good for my stress levels. It's my form of meditation. But I don't all the time. Why? And why am I buying these $6, $7, $10, $14 items to feed myself instead of, doing it at home? Well, it's very simple. I'm busy. I'm seeing people. Mondays and Tuesdays, I usually don't leave the office until 8. Wednesdays, I usually don't leave the office till about 6:30 or 7. Thursday, I leave the office at 6. And Friday, I'm usually out of here at 5. And then I'm here on the weekends for about 3 hours. Point being, let's see. I can go home every single day at 5 p.m. and cook a meal and save the money on the pizza slice, or I can spend the $7 on the pizza slice, $6, $7, whatever it is, and sign 2 clients, which puts money in my pocket, a lot more than $6 or $7. What makes sense? Again, it's a trade-off, okay? So the reason I'm mentioning this is, again, benchmarks can be helpful. Advice is helpful, but if you've seen any of my other videos, there was one in particular where I talk about, advice that seems well-meaning but is really utterly useless and is more for the benefit of the advice giver than the advice receiver. A lot of people like to try to tell you what to do with your money, and I get it. It's tempting, especially someone who's struggling with that. What do you know? You should listen to me. But I do tell people, look, budgeting makes sense. Laying everything out and seeing where your money goes makes sense. When you do that with people, when they really start to see where their money's going, most people are not idiots, okay? And even the idiots aren't total idiots. They can see the waste. They can see the fat. They can see where, where they're really blowing their brains out. The question is not so much what they write on the budget, it's will they execute. But they can see. And telling someone, no, you can't go to restaurants, or no, your rent cannot be $1 more than this, otherwise you're a fool, without considering their circumstances, is poor advice, and it stops short. Okay, it doesn't get to the heart of the problem, and it doesn't help the person move forward with what I would call a intelligent budget. Okay, not a perfect budget, there's no such thing. Okay, but an intelligent budget, something that encompasses the needs of the individual, and their individual circumstances. Oh, and by the way, you'll hear people say, well, you need to distinguish between a want and a need. Okay, are cigarettes a want or a need? I'm serious. Are cigarettes a want or a need? Because for me, they're not either. I don't smoke, so I guess I would classify that as a want. If you're a pack a day person, that is a need. Okay, it may be a need that is slowly harming you, but you're addicted to the nicotine. That is a need. Okay, so these are subjective. Okay, I don't care what anyone says. The other than food. And even then, the type of food. So, survival, okay? Anything short of that, want, need, not a fan. We'll talk about that in another video, but I'm at the 11 minute mark. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Take care.